Welcome to another draw process. I'm Ike. Let's draw a comic book page and process about being a comic artist.
Thumbnail. Sun crouched down, chained with these handcuffs to this loop of iron on the ground. So he's trapped there. He's tired after being half drowned and dragged here. Denise walks in. They have a little emotional moment of, well, at least, making eye contact. They see each other's expressions, how they're feeling. And then King Croc speaks. So I find that that's often missing in comics because the real estate, the amount of space available on pages is limited. That for a lot of us, especially maybe you could say men, people that are maybe less emotionally inclined, drama inclined, we will cut those emotional moments. We'll cut those, like, people's expressions and how they're connecting with each other gets kind of cut out of the scene, and you keep the action. Those moments, like, really help. They're really important to give some depth to the scene, some grounding. So to get a sense of, these characters see each other. One is making this expression, the other this. They each have an interpretation of each other's expression. And and then we have our interpretation. Those moments just really bring things to life. So sometimes in my comics, I've noticed I skip over that to a degree because of real estate, because of page number limitations or whatever, or just lacking foresight. And I see it a lot in other people's comics. I also see it being overdone too. I think it's possible to overdo that. But they're very helpful moments. So, I try to look at my thumbnails and my plan for these pages and see, can I squeeze in some more panels? Can I get more comfortable with a style that involves smaller panels so I can squeeze in some faces, some expressions? And especially when two characters are looking at each other and they share a look, that gives so much information to the reader, and so much that they're going to be, it also gives them a moment to think. Like, they're going to project onto it. They're going to be thinking about this moment and how does it feel. If you show, like, this beautiful enchanted forest to the reader, like, if you draw it really well, and I think this is maybe something artists, tend to do. You draw it really well and you think, okay, now people will go, wow. But if you had a worse drawing or a simpler drawing that gave less wow, but you had a character on the page in the next panel saying wow and expressing wow, then the reader might actually pause longer and feel that wonder the way you want them to, more than if you just showed them the picture, hoping that the picture communicates. So when people say pictures are worth 1,000 words, yes, maybe there's some wisdom in some of these sayings, but at the same time, that doesn't mean it has to be a picture of the enchanted forest. It could be just a person's expression. Trying to make sure I include those. That tends to involve close-ups, so that I can get just a face and capturing it, their expression. And letting it be seen more easily. But sometimes body language and stuff, like this panel right here, is capturing a lot of how Sun feels without giving much information on his face expression, just by his posture and everything. And then I guess since I'm on this topic, another thing is there's comics where it's a lot of, like, close-ups on one character, the other, but you never see them looking at each other. Like, they're not drawn in a panel together. Like, you might call that an over-the-shoulder shot. You see over one person's shoulder the camera looking at the other person, and then swapping to the other. if the reader never sees the two in physical space, like, it's not just that. It's like character A shouldn't just be like looking at the camera, looking at the reader to show their expression so the reader can see their expression. The reader wants to see, like, let's say, over the shoulder of another character, so that not only do they see how they interpret character A's expression, but they see how they imagine character B interpreting it. And we are very social creatures, so there's so many layers to this information that can be helpful and engaging, very engaging to readers. So that's something I'm learning to do more of. And like I said, in where they're in the space together, so interacting with each other, it is helpful. This this whole scene is going to have a lot of, I designed it to be a lot of grids, a lot of blocks. Not a lot of, there's shadow, but it's not, there's not cubbies. There's not places for the shadows to collect very much. I designed this place basically on the page. And I had to balance a lot of factors. So if you design architecture that has cubbies and different things that stick out and whatnot, you're going to create opportunities for shadow and depth. Different elements that can be used, almost like props. Like it can differentiate backgrounds from figure to figure, and also like positioning your lighting so that you get interesting lighting on your figures. But you have to balance that with like draw ability, reproducibility from panel to panel. Can I keep reproducing this background? And can I draw it at all these different angles that are going to be needed and things like that? And then, of course, just storytelling design. Like I wanted this place to feel like just a big block, just almost like like you're inside a pyramid, just this large stone plain space. Yeah. So there are these oil lanterns throughout this throne room of King Croc. But when the double doors swing open, the sunlight from outside is invading this space. So what wouldn't have been in black solid shadow now is, in comparison to this bright light source where the door opens. This is another reason, like, I like to think in terms of film and camera and that sort of thing, because it makes sense in those terms. I guess the human eye would also do this. Like the bright door opens, your eyes adjust. Like suddenly everything else seems dark compared to how bright that is. But then you close the door, your eyes adjust, and you can see more nuances in what's left. So, yeah, it's really fun to incorporate that effects, you could say, like solar flare and motion blur could sort of count, although that involves motion. Yeah, anything you put on the page that you're representing an abstract concept in a way, visually, I think that's just a lot of fun. I guess speed lines kind of fit in that realm to a degree, but they're kind of their own, like they're kind of a language rather than representing something that you might find in film or nature. So yeah, that kind of stuff is a lot of fun to incorporate. because this room is also lit softly in a way with these lanterns, there's going to be like the corners are going to end up in shadow. Underneath the lanterns, there's going to be some shadow. And it's kind of like the light sources are moving and dancing. So there's no strict, not only is there not one light source, there's multiple from all directions, but there's not like a strict light source where one is stronger than the other just because you're closer to it or whatever, because the light is dancing. So the shadows that I'm putting on the figures can kind of not even match necessarily, like from head to toe. They're not all necessarily going to be, the light hitting the figure in at the same angle, or any strict rules there, because it just, it works well. So now am I thinking really hard about that? I mean, it sounds like, oh, I'm just really thinking this all through, but it's more like when I'm drawing this page, I realized like how that would feel, this kind of lighting, and that I would, maybe I want to have my shadows look a little more rounded and varying into it in a way, varying like along the form. But I didn't really think it through. I just sensed it. I just felt it, what it might feel like if I was looking at this boy here in this room, and how I would represent that with just some flicks of the wrist with the pencil. And I mean, that's the ultimate goal, to just be able to express yourself through drawing. And so what I feel, what I imagine, to just put it on the page, that is like the best. But when things go wrong, that's when I get to reflect. And that's where this becomes like a really reflective process, is like, what just went wrong when something goes wrong? And is it just me being judgmental on myself? Is it literally a skill I don't have or something I don't know? Am I not envisioning the room right, and I'm just blindly applying rules? I'm not envisioning like the actual character in the space. Am I sticking to, is my imagination too narrow in how I'm imagining these spaces, and could I push that envelope? Am I sticking to two stylistic choices that are restricting my language use? So certain camera angles and poses and stuff that people might use again and again, and it gets easy and it gets second nature, but it may not communicate with as big of a vocabulary as you're capable of, as you could be capable of. So those are all like hard questions to answer, and you just kind of have to reflect and think about why it is you're doing what you're doing, what the problems were. I always find film very useful because in film you will often find a lot of work going into the environment design, the lighting, the color, and all sorts of things like that. The outfits and whatnot. So, and interesting effects that can be accomplished with cameras, depth of field and focus and whatnot. So when you see those meticulous works of art there, I find that really useful to consider. Oh, like I drew a fan comic of a scene from The Fifth Element. I really like that movie. But just seeing how everything was designed for me, I was drawing a comic, but I didn't have to design the backgrounds of the characters and how they looked. It was already done. I'm just kind of copying it basically. But that was insightful to like how much work can go into those things, and that if I would have imagined that, I could have done that. Yeah, that's always nice. But I like comics too. Anything that gets you looking and thinking of different ways of communicating. So yeah, here's this over-the-shoulder shot of Denise looking at Sun. This look he's giving her, I'm trying to get a feel for, like, okay, what is he expressing to her? What is this emotion? What is this supposed to say? And then I'm like, okay, where's the shadows gonna fall? And where do I want them to fall? And yeah, like her rough form there was just a placeholder to make sure I positioned him well. But I erased it because I knew I could adjust it some. All right. Yeah, so, the more you can draw human forms and rooms and these things from different angles, from just any angle with any foreshortening, any perspective, if you get that skill, you will liberate yourself to do all kinds of camera angles and shots that you wouldn't have done before. But if you start from the foundation of just your current skill level drawing, it can actually be difficult to imagine what camera angles you could use that you wouldn't default to, because you feel that restriction of drawing it from that angle. So one thing I like to do is, if I do a rough drawing of, I try to get past my own drawing limitations by drawing very roughly in my thumbnail, and just drawing the angle I need, and knowing that I can't execute that figure very well at that angle with my current skill level, let's say. But because it's such a rough drawing, I'm not even thinking about, can I do this or not? I just know what needs to be done, and then I need to figure out how to do it. But if you start with more detailed drawings, your own drawing limitations might limit the camera angles you choose, and then in turn, you won't learn more. You won't push the envelope of what you can do in your drawing, and then you stagnate. So you have to push the envelope. And for me, it's usually in terms of storytelling. It's referencing film and things like that, rather than stylistic type improvements. It's more in the realm of free drawing and panel composition, camera angles, that kind of thing. Yeah, so, and then, the writing. So this is, I already mentioned the importance of the emotional beat just in principle, but we are introducing also a little of Denise's struggle to be evil, let's say. She has a history with Sword and Farah. They don't know that yet because she's been wearing a mask and looks different now. But she has given herself to serving the lizards, and she doesn't like herself. She doesn't like that she's going to let this boy be captured and delivered to Lord Tsar to be killed. So she's got some conflict here, and I wanted a moment with her before she's presented with a dilemma, greater conflict than she's already got. So she thinks it's one thing when she walks in here, and it'll turn out to be another. So taking a moment, taking a whole page for her to walk in the room, kind of, is helpful. Like, she could have just I could have just had the door open. Hey, King Croc, sup? Next thing happens. But you got to slow it down sometimes. And some of this I figured out after I wrote the initial, rough script. I had played with her dying in this first issue. Changed some of these events in order of events. I don't want to say too much, I guess, but as I sat with the story, because I'm releasing one page a week, so this is 34 weeks of doing this. It gives me a lot of time to edit and to sit with the story and make sure I really like the story that I'm telling. Now I can't change the old pages, but I can change the ones coming up. And I can't help but do it because I just enjoy thinking about the story. I probably wouldn't think about it very much if I didn't allow myself to change it. And yeah, that's an interesting idea in itself, to be working on a story that is going to take you. Some of my comics I've drawn in like a few months, or this one that's, going to be like a year. But to work on something for like a long time, and do you just sit and draw the story when it's time and you have that script document you work from and like you reference drawings of your characters? Or do you think about your characters all the time? And I'm somewhere in the middle. I don't think about them that much probably, but yeah, like if I'm going to draw in the sketchbook and just doodle, I kind of want to draw my character, one of them. And sometimes I think about the story and I think about the characters and what they're doing and going through. When I listen to writing advice or interviews or biographies, whatnot, I imagine, okay, how does this fit for like a character like Sword or Sun? And I keep rethinking, okay, this dynamic between, this kind of father-son dynamic going on. And if you haven't caught it, he's not actually his father. He's called Son because he's the first son. He's like of the first peoples is what they're called, the first humans. So they're like Herculean, right? And mythical, and haven't been around in a long time. And that's why lizard people took over. So he's just in the care of Sword, who got his name from just being the most deadly sword and the only person really that uses a long sword in this world. So at this point, I did pull up my phone just to reference the shape of crocodile heads. Crocs tend to have a much more narrow snout than gators, but not necessarily. And I wanted him to be a crocodile, but some are a little wider. So he's kind of in between the two. But yeah, I still have not been happy with like a final design for his full body once he's out of the shadow. But I know what his head and neck look like. I establish his arms, his tail, and then in the next page. But then I've got to, I'm going to have to draw him stepping out into the light. So we're going to see what he looks like fully, and how I work it out on the page there. That's how it's going to be for the rest of the comic. Now for a character like Lord Tsar, the Emperor, and yes, that is kind of a play on words because he's a lizard and he's Lord Tsar. But I will not, I'm going to design him ahead of time. And I already have like a design, a working design at the moment. But he will be, planned out ahead of time because he's a much more important character that's going to continue to recur. So I need to be happy with that one. But I knew with this guy, if it was just a giant crocodile, it would be fine for the story. And that I just wanted to alter it some to have a little bit more human-like form, like to be able to stand on its rear legs, the shape of its hip and rear legs, and then a little bit longer, forearms. Its front arms. So yeah. What I'm working out here is this shadow in front of his. He's got like a cave underneath the chair, the throne chair, and he never sits on the chair. He won't fit on it. It's just there as like a set piece. He just stays in this dark cubby, but his snout is sticking out of the shadow, and I was working out where to put some of the highlights of how much of him to show that's in shadow. And I went with some, but I could have done none or just an edge. Notice here, her eyes are looking to her right, which is actually not where the boy is. So that was something I struggled with even on the page. I was like, do I have her look like at him or away? And I went with like away. So the idea is she diverted her eyes because she couldn't stand looking at him, which is a sign that she's feeling shame of what she's doing. And so she's going to look away, or however the reader wants to interpret it. But yeah, that was an active choice there. These squiggles, so there's this little, there's these water puddles. It could be blood, but in this case, it's probably water because he came from the water. And on an earlier page, when we first showed the throne room, it was probably blood. But with the blood, I do like sometimes this reflective surface kind of squiggles on it. So that's what those zigzag lines are on those curved shapes on the stone floor he's on. That is going to be like partly filled in with ink, and give it this kind of like these vertical lines of reflection to show that it's wet. Yeah. But I'm doing what I can to keep my practice going and keep sharing with others. It's been good lately to get more invested in other artists and the art community that I'm a part of, Clever Kaiju. Just to help see a lot of people get better at being the practice of their art. It's really been good, and I haven't once felt like it's taking away from my own art practice. Like it just feels like they really push each other. Like that my investment and time spent with other artists and with that community is making my own practice, like I'm more excited to do it. I'm just more clear-headed when I approach my work and stuff, even if there's less time technically to do it. It just helps. So that's been really good, and I'm still sticking with the sketchbooks and the practice. And I think it's paying off. I see things getting a little better, a little smoother, a little more clear of what's next. And faster, I think, too. So excited to see how that goes. Maybe I'll even be able to do more pages per week. That'd be awesome if I could put out a few pages a week. But that'll be a ways out because I've got another comic to draw, actually. So I'll have to start by fitting that one in, finishing it up, and then maybe upping this to 2 per week. But I say that not because I would spend more time with it, like not exactly more time, just faster work on the pages. So. Yeah. What I'm drawing there is all going to end up in shadow, but I drew around the white lines of the block work that I wanted to leave showing. I don't always bother with that, but in this case, this room is like so gridded with these blocks. It works pretty easily to throw some of that in there. And because the light's dancing around, it makes sense that you're going to see a little bit. What I've got here, the full bleed panel, I am letting, it's sort of functioning like a border. I'm leaving a gap between this drawing and the panel above, but no actual panel border. Yeah, so as I'm doing this, I know I was not feeling super sure about where I wanted to throw these highlights and how much to show, but I wanted to capture the full, mouth. So I went ahead and left a gap there. I wasn't sure how much of inside the mouth to leave in shadow. So because so much of it's in black, my plan is just, I'm going to have to put the blacks in and then see if I want to eliminate more of the highlights in that shadow of the croc head. Yeah, filling in the areas and sometimes making minor changes to them. Because my style has all the same line weight. I don't use a brush for lines or anything with varying line weight. It's just all the same pen. Because of that, it forces me, it hinders me into decisions I have to make that maybe other people wouldn't have to worry as much about. Like when it comes to composition and form and shadow, I've got to do more of that. I feel, to give weight and depth in ways that line weight could do. But I like that. I like having that limitation and that sort of need to resolve these things with that's created by using just the one line weight. Yeah. Almost done there. Yeah, things are going pretty good. So, this voiceover I'm doing just a few days before it's out, just like last week. And then I've got one more page in this set of thumbnails, and then I need to thumbnail some new pages. I'm getting faster at that, but I don't know. I may have to slow down a bit because what's coming up is the fight scenes and some things that I still need to figure out in the writing a little bit. I still need to figure out some things I'm playing with that will happen between Denise and them since she's now, she's in this scene too. But a lot of fighting that I have to work out that's going to be complicated. Fighting a giant croc is not as easy to capture and to allow for some dynamic action to occur than it is with just like two guys with swords or like the earlier fight scene. So yeah, it'll have challenges to it. Yeah, you'll see I'm adding more shadow than I originally had, and I also noticed that I needed to reveal more of the snout because it can't line up with the the shadow line on the ground, because if you imagine the snout sticking out past the line, that line of shadow, then the shadow, the line of that light, that shadow is going to follow the curve of the 3D object on top of it. And my original pencil didn't quite accentuate that enough, so that's what I did with the whiteout. This whiteout is pretty much just where lines went past the border edge. I'm going ahead and hitting those. Just a few little things to clean up, but not a lot of major changes this time. And I already did this once, but I needed a second layer to cover it up better. You'll see that sometimes I just use an empty spot on the paper to like get my pen cooperating, getting, saturated. And that's the finished page. The start of this location for the final events of this issue. That is it. I'm generally excited. Kind of not a lot to say again, but I'm excited about how things are going. And I know that if I just keep sticking with this, I'm going to really be going, in the right direction. So, yeah, I'm doing it, and I hope you are too. It's worth it. It's a worthwhile project to do something so individual like this. And very like therapeutic for me to have something like this that's just my own journey here. Very, very helpful to have in my life. But yeah, be the practice of your art. Encourage others to do the same. See you next week.